Thank you, Marjorie. Good morning, and welcome to the regular joint meeting with the Howard County Council and the Board of Education. Due to the local state of emergency, the proceeding this morning is being conducted via WebEx teleconference. It is also available to the public through live stream on the County Council website. At this time, I will do a roll call for the council members, followed by the Board of Education Chair, Dr. Wu, doing a roll call for his membership. Dr. Jones?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Ms. Rigby? I understand Ms. Rigby may be joining us later. Ms. Young?
Here.
And Mr. Youngman?
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Wu?
Thank you, Chair Walsh, for inviting the school board to this meeting. I'm doing a roll call. Ms. Marlowe?
What did you say, Joe?
I'm doing a roll call. I just call your name and you're here. Ms.
Yes, I'm
Cortona?
here. Sorry, couldn't understand you. Present.
Ms. Damasmore?
Present.
Dr. Lu?
Present.
Ms. Mosley? I think I didn't see her. All right. Ms. Watts?
Present.
Mr. Banyas? Not here, right? Okay, myself. So we have a quorum on the school board side. Chair Walsh.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. We do have 4 agenda items on our agenda for this morning. The first is the adequate public facilities ordinance, and that is the meeting required by code, given that certain school capacities are expected to exceed Apfo thresholds. Then we'll get to school opening and an array of issues specific to that in the midst of an ongoing COVID pandemic. Long-term deferred maintenance is our 3rd agenda item, followed by a budget update. I assume that's for fiscal year 2022. So with that, if we haven't already, can we elevate to panelists those members who will be participating in our discussion of the adequate public facilities ordinance? And again, this is the meeting that is required by code due to the fact that school capacity does not seem to meet projected enrollment. We have attached to the council members prep materials, things like school capacity charts, housing unit allocations. But I wonder, I don't know, Dr. Wu, is there someone on the school side who could give us a sense of where we are in terms of school enrollment and the ability to teach them in a school facility that meets their need?
Sure. Dr. Marano, do you want to go ahead to give some overview about the enrollment for this year?
Well, let me, good morning, first and foremost, to the council and to the Board of Education, and thank you. I always look forward to these meetings, and I appreciate the support and respect that you always convey to the school system and to our board. Let me start with some enrollment figures, and then as we're talking about Apfo, I will specifically turn that over to Mr. Washington and his team. But I would like for you to jot these numbers down to frame this. In 2019, at this time of the year, these are all unofficial numbers. In 2019, our enrollment numbers were 57,518. 2020, in the height of the pandemic, when we were in virtual education, our enrollment was 56,279. I am happy to report today, unofficially, our enrollment is 57,668 students, and our enrollment has bounced back. I want to frame that also further to level set, to give you an understanding of where we are with our numbers, which we look at ongoing. Our kindergarten enrollment 3 years ago, 2019, was 3,922. In 2019, our kindergarten enrollment was 3,922. 2020, last year at this time, our kindergarten enrollment was 3,566. Our current kindergarten enrollment is 3,822. And why do I give you that number? Because I view that as a leading indicator. We continue to have enrollment registrations occurring in our schools. as individuals have made their own individual decisions about COVID, and then also individuals who make decisions after the Labor Day holiday. We're still seeing an increase in our enrollment. So with that, our numbers project what they are. Those will be officially reported at the end of the month to MSDE, and those will be officially certified for all planning efforts through this year. As it pertains to APFO and the discussions of which we're having today, I'm going to ask that Mr. Washington please join me, if you would, and provide some more amplification to this topic. Mr. Washington?
Dr. Martirano?
Yes,
This is
Mr.
Dan
Ludwig.
Lubley, Director
Yes.
of Capital Planning and Construction. Mr. Washington is having difficulties hearing at the moment, so I believe he needs to restart WebEx.
Okay.
I'd be happy to step in here. I do have with me Mr. Tim Rogers, our Manager of School Planning. We are here happy to answer any questions that you may have with regards to the APFO requirements. As Chair Walsh noted, the County Council and the board was provided the virtual binder that had a lot of information with regards to APFO and the school closure charts. I'll ask Mr. Rogers to give a little more information in his work in preparing the projections in the past, as well as the projections as we've seen this year with the DPZ, with the county. But if there are any specific questions that you may have, we'd be happy to address those with regards to APFO.
Thanks, Mr. Lubley. Good morning, Board of Education members, County Council members. I would just like to start by mentioning that the chart that was provided with the APFO packet this year began with the 2020 enrollment projection. So a lot of the information and the strategies that you'll see identified here are related to the feasibility study that was presented in June of 2020. So it's kind of a complicated timing situation, but I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have another feasibility study that we presented in June 2021 that has different information. And in the chart that was provided that this meeting is based on, you'll see a list of schools that are projected to be in by 2026, so 5 years out, 95% or greater capacity utilization 2020, and then projected to exceed that 110% threshold by 2026. And you'll see a secondary list containing 5 schools showing those that were not yet greater than 95% capacity utilization in 2020, but still projected to exceed the 110% line by 2026. You'll see in the chart additionally the current and proposed capacities, the number of relocatable classrooms at each of those schools, again, as of 2020, and then the potential solutions as identified in our June 2020 feasibility study. So with that basic information, like Mr. Lubley mentioned, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Council members, any questions? Unfortunately, I can't get the usual view that I have in WebEx, so I can't see anyone. And now, regrettably, because I'm speaking, I see myself. All right, well, I have a question. Council members, please weigh in, and same for board members. So, right, the statute says, and this is 16-1103D of the county code. This meeting is required because the schools reach 95% capacity, or it's projected to exceed 110% capacity within the next 5 years. I think we've had this meeting every one of the last 3 years that this council has been in office, and the proposed solutions don't look any different to me. You know, we happily, you said, Dr. Martirano, you're proud to or happy to report that our enrollment has bounced back up, but what that means is that we have the same problem that we've always had, and we don't have any different solutions, right? The solutions are put more trailers in the back. I mean, these are the same 3 solutions that we've seen in a situation where we just keep putting more trailers in the back, I can't imagine that we think putting more trailers in the back is the right solution for kids who are in 2nd and 4th and 6th grade now. Like this, I don't know. I know also as part of this meeting, the executive is invited to participate. And I do think that's a critical third part of this solution, because it is the allocation of dollars, I think, and how we use them and what we spend them on, whether a trailer in the back or a new school or a rehabilitation of a school that adds capacity there. Mrs. Harrod, who do we have from the administration who could help us understand the executive's position on what these proposed solutions have been identified to be?
We have Mr. Carl DiLorenzo and we have Mr. Jeff Brownell.
Okay, great. Mr. DiLorenzo, can you help us with that?
I'm sorry, I've been on mute. I will attempt an answer and put something out and see if that works as a starting point for a discussion. And kind of the reason why this is on my mind is because we just completed it a few weeks ago. So annually, the county has to produce the county collects public school facility surcharge to finance, used to finance capital projects for the for HCPSS facilities, and we have to produce a report annually, and that we have to produce a report to the General Assembly and also send a copy to the County Council. And that report was just sent at the end of August, and in it includes a list of all the projects that our school facility surcharge has been spent on. So that may be one point of information that we can use to see how kind of funding priorities are aligning with, with capacity challenges. I can speak. I don't think our budgets office is on here, but I do know that when the county makes its capital project decisions, CIP decisions, I know it works off of the HCPSS CIP, their capital improvement plan. So that's also another tool that's used to determine what's funded. So if it helps, I don't know, Board of Education members may not have this school surcharge report, but I can circulate that to them and they can kind of see how county budget expenditures are aligning with capacity, with capacity projects, capacity related projects. So Ms. Walsh, I'll kind of start there as two documents, the school system CIP and our school surcharge report. And if that yields some good conversation, we can go from there. If you want me to touch on something else, just let me know.
Mr. Lulu, you are happily within the 4 screens I can see. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I was looking for the raise your hand emote. I can't find that in here. So to expand on what Mr. DiLorenzo is noting, I think a large aspect of the strategies going forward, unfortunately, do come down to funding. As Mr. Rogers noted, what was provided to you is, in essence, a year old. So the potential solutions that are identified were from 2020. The 2021 feasibility study identified other strategies. And to help with this discussion, I'd like to point a few things out. You'll notice for all the high schools, they all hinge on high school 13 opening in 2022. We are slated starting next year to enter into the boundary adjustment process for high school number 13. At this point, until we have that discussions with the Board of Education, the County Council, and the community, we as an office are unable to identify which of those schools will be addressed by that boundary. However, we do have 1,658 new seats opening in that area, so that will be a large help for the high school level. An item to note for the middle school right now is they all say for boundary review, which is a viable option. I do want to point out in the capital budget, in our earlier years of our long-range master plan, we do currently have listed in a renovation and addition at Dunlongan Middle School, as well as a renovation addition at Oakland Mills, both of which will add additional capacity at the middle school level to help address several of these schools. And then you can see in the potential solutions, we do list in there the new elementary schools that will help at the elementary level. But the reason I wanted to bring it back to the discussion back to the funding is we do have a lot of opportunities that are out there. One item that I believe Mr. Youngman and several county council members have brought up in the past is the potential for P3, which we have looked further into. There are some limitations and considerations that we would definitely need to discuss with you further for the longevity of that option. More recently, we have the Built to Learn Act, which has allocated funding, specifically 6.6% of the funding to Howard County. While that is additional state funding, it does come with that requirement of the state local cost share, which again gets us back into that funding availability. So we do have options for new potential solutions, which all revolve again around funding.
Thank you, Mr. Lubley. Ms. Cotroneo?
Mr. Lubley mentioned the boundary adjustment as a potential solution for middle schools, but honestly, middle schools is where we are really struggling. We don't have any more capacity at the middle school level, and with projects not coming online, Dunlongan I think is 2026 and Oakland Mills Middle is maybe 2030. We are sort of at a crisis point in the middle school level, and as you did state that it seems to be the same solutions, and it's sort of like a wish list because without funding, these solutions mean nothing. It's just words on a paper. And we seem to have with each feasibility study, each report, it's the same exact verbiage. And the only solution that seems to be happening is the relocatables. And with each passing year, we buy more of these temporary classrooms. So the funding is the critical piece. And I think without a discussion of the funding, and especially as we go to the next general plan and Hoco by design, and without really aligning the CIP of the school system with that, we are really going to be at a crisis point, even worse than we are today. So I just want to elevate that whole funding piece to this, because these solutions are not viable without it. Thank you. And I apologize. I'm going to have to be going back and forth because I have a May legislative committee meeting at the same time. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cotroneo. And I do understand Ms. Rigby from the council has joined us. Perhaps Dr. Jones has also gone to competing obligation. I don't see any hands up again. Ms. Tarrant, if you do, please let me know. Ms. Cotroneo, I'm glad you brought up the Hoco by design. I would hope that the board, as a collective body elected by our 300,000 plus constituents, would take an active role in that Hoco by design process, particularly as it elevates to the county council. I know going into that exercise, however many months ago, I thought this council's unified request to the consultant tasked with that exercise and the department and the administration overseeing it, that it do exactly what you said, which was link school capacity and the ability to school the children that arrive through virtue of whatever projected and encouraged growth is. And notwithstanding those unified, consistent requests from the very beginning, I see no evidence of that having taken place now, months away from probably that exercise being completed and delivered to the council. There are other opportunities, I think, for the Board of Education to get involved on the legislative side as well. And that is, even this month, right, is a project that's before the council for a pilot. But in tandem with that is, if the pilot is approved, which I expect it would be, there's a request that the project be excused from Apfo. And it's it's a large development in a community that's going to feed to Wall Lake Middle School that it can walk to, which is awesome. Same as Wall Lake High School. But we need to know, the council needs to know and have input from those who are best equipped to tell us about the impacts of proceeding with exemptions like that from you guys. So if it is a matter of concern, or if it's not, if it's fine, if it's great, if we should exempt them from AFO, I think we need to know both of that from you. Thank you, Ms. Harrod, for letting me know that Ms. Rigby and Mr. Youngman have their hands up. I'm going to let Ms. Rigby ladies first go, and then you, Mr. Youngman.
Thanks, Ms. Walsh. Sorry, I'm a little sick, so that is why I sound like this. So in regards to the general plan, I think knowing that the single family detached homes are some of the biggest producers of children into our school system, that I really do hope that we are focused on that missing middle and providing different housing opportunities than already exist in Howard County, because that will change the number of school children coming out. So I highly encourage everyone to be involved in that, and really to be looking at missing middle housing as a solution, both because then you will receive funding from the creation of that, but then also less children from the creation of that. And we'll hopefully receive reduced traffic, because then people won't be commuting as far into Howard County. I wanted to circle back to Mr. Lubley's boundary review. You had said that would be an option, and then Ms. Cotroneo said it wouldn't be an option. So if someone could just explain to me, if someone could just explain how it would be an option, if there is capacity, what capacity exists, because we're not going to be able to solve this in a year, and it really is going to take both, strategic housing type focus. It's going to take, operating impact. I would love to talk recordation again if anybody wants to. But there's no one thing that's going to change it. It's really a multi-tiered strategy, I think, that will get us out of this place that we have all found ourselves arrived in. But Mr. Lubley, if you could explain what you meant, that would be helpful to me.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I'd like to ask Mr. Rogers, as he was very heavily involved in prior position and his current position as manager in the development of the projections and these recommendations. So, Tim, if you would please expound on the recommendation for boundary review at the middle school level specifically.
Sure. I think overall, Ms. Cotroneo is correct that there is not much available in the way of capacity at the middle school level. We have a number of schools that are on the upper end of target utilization, and a few, as listed here, that are over target utilization and are projected to continue to grow in that trend. However, I think there are still opportunities to balance across schools and provide relief to some of our highest utilization middle schools going forward. And we'll have that opportunity as a secondary layer to the high school 13 redistricting that's coming up beginning next year. However, at the middle school level, I would also mention and echo what Mr. Lubley and others have said, that boundary review as a solution here is probably also best tied to capacity projects that are in our CIP and are in the latter years of the long-range master plan.
So, Mr. Rogers, maybe you could explain that part a bit, because if we know that generally speaking we have about 50 billion in bonds, then how does the capacity project align with the boundary review? How does it all roll up to make sure this is all working in tandem with each other?
Yeah, I think ideally what we would do is strategically place those projects, those capacity adding projects in middle schools, so that they could provide relief to not just that middle school, but adjacent schools as well. So you'll see listed on this chart, Folly Quarter Middle, Mount View Middle, and Patapsco Middle. There is a renovation for Patapsco Middle in our CIP. So ideally, the seats added there would, in conjunction with boundary review, would provide relief to the other two middle schools that are nearby.
But is it possible to do that within the 50 if we have all the other projects going on concurrently? Like, how will it all work together with the money that's available? How are you prioritizing what needs to be built with the money that's available? And like working with the boundary review, that's the part I think I'm missing.
And I think that it's, sorry, Tim, if I could jump in a little bit here. I think this is an item that is a constant conversation with the capital budget, is the challenges that we face with the capital budget, with the capacity, the deferred maintenance, or regular maintenance, and the other needs of the school system. So as you're pointing out, Ms. Rigby, the $50 million in bonds on the local level has to address all of those individual items. So I want to make sure that the community that is listening is not misunderstanding and thinking that there are $50 million to solely go to large capacity projects. Is that $50 million on the local level, as you're very well pointing out, needs to address all of those items, including the ongoing projects, the ongoing systemic projects, and the local match for any capital projects that we may have. So that is one of the largest challenges that we have within our capital budget, is how to spread that out. And that's what our capital budget tries to take a look at and do, which is one reason that projects tend to be spread a little further. And it all, again, comes back to the available funding that we have. And that's when it then goes to what Mr. Rogers is saying. When we are able to do a capital project that does include capacity, we're able to take that into account looking at the surrounding schools. And when that new capacity comes online, able to do a semblance of a boundary review to whatever level is appropriate to address the new seats.
Okay, and this will be the last thing I say, and I imagine I'm almost teeing this up for Mr. Youngman, but it does. I think I'm in a similar space as Ms. Cotroneo, where it's like the same things, and I think we had talked previously when you looked at the deferred maintenance P3 that it might be around 30 million a year. So if we're doing, say, we get through these large projects that we have now, and then you shift to 30 million a year to really start to chip away at this deferred maintenance and ongoing maintenance, then that leaves 20 to, address and build upon your other projects. But how do they all work together? So I appreciate the explanation, because I think it's helped a bit, and I will yield to Mr. Youngman.
Mr. Youngman, before you start, Mr. Lubley, can you confirm where does the 50 million come from?
The 50 million is the bonds that Ms. Rigby mentioned, and I believe last year during the end of the work sessions for the FY22 capital budget, the school system was noted by the county council that we could be looking at potentially 50 million of local funding towards our capital budget. Please correct me if I am wrong, Ms. Rigby, but I believe that's what you were mentioning as far as the 50 million.
All right, it looks like she's not correcting you. Okay.
Chair Walsh, I'm sorry, this Mrs. Harrod. We're getting some comments from the public that those that are using headsets, the volume is not very audible to the public. So if you are using headsets, please speak very loudly and very clearly.
Thank you, Mrs. Harrod. Mr. Youngman?
Thank you. A couple things. One, thank you, Mr. Lubley, for mentioning that you're looking at alternative ways to finance these things. You had, Mr. DiLorenzo had referred us to the school facility surcharge chart, and frankly, 2021 was a great year because we were at the higher rates that the council approved 2 years ago, but we're still developing at the square footage volume that predated the changes to Apfo in 2018. So we were able to meet the debt service requirements plus provide 3 million in pay-go. The measurements of the early stage development post changes in Apfo show that we're going to be developing in the future, and we see this in the new general plan as well, less square footage. So as nice as this year was with the school facility surcharge, we controlled the rate, but the other function of that is the amount of square footage being charged that rate on. And I just see that funding source starting to go back down again. So that's great. You're looking at alternatives. A question for, I guess, Mr. Lubley. One of the things that we've talked about in this conversation a bunch of times is aligning the geographic areas of how we plan growth or residential growth with how you guys plan. You know, you guys have your regions, we have polygons, school districts, then regions. The county general plan uses these goofy things like established communities, and you know, it's not even geographically sort of tied. And what I'm hearing is this year there was an inability to really pursue that goal of aligning those geographic areas. It wouldn't have to be the 6 that you have, you know, whatever they turned out to be, which would not only help to manage growth on a more micro level, it would probably create more neighborhood schools. It would probably create more predictability for people, more walkers. But the problem is that the school system can't commit to stay within those boundaries. And it's not to say within your little region that you might not redistrict from one elementary school to the other, but there would be sort of a wall around each of those regions, which would align with how we're planning and DPZ's planning and development's happening. What really is the problem of why we can't get to a place where the school system can almost look at, and I don't know how many there'd be, 10, make that number up, where you know you only redistrict within that small area, that you manage capital dollars in the short term going into that small area when you see a spike and something's out of whack. Took me a long time to ask that question. Sorry.
No, thank you for the question. I think it is a loaded question, especially when we start to look at specifically planning capital dollars to go into specific regions versus the entire needs of the school system. I would like Mr. Rogers to expound a little more on specifically with your question regarding the alignment of our individual regions with the county's planning regions. I know he and Mr. Ronow have had conversations. Before I go to you, Mr. Rogers, I saw Dr. Wu raise his hand as Mr. Youngman was asking a question. So, Dr. Wu, did you have something you wanted to say specifically to this question before we go to Mr. Rogers? I believe you're muted there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Chair Walsh, I just want to let you know we have a few board members raise their hand, and I want you to give them an opportunity to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wu. Once Mr. Lubley's finished answering Mr. Youngman's question, how about can I turn it back to you, Dr. Wu, and you can call on those members or your board members who are pending, because I've tried every possible button on my screen and I can only see 4 of you at a time, and it's never the 4 of you who want to ask questions.
So you can see the participant, they raise their hand on the right side of the screen. So if you click participant.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Rogers if he can expand a little more on the alignment of our regions with the county's planning regions.
Regions that we public facilities.
I can't hear him.
I can, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers, if you can speak up, I saw you took your headphones off. If we're having difficulty hearing you.
See if there's a setting I can tweak. Sure. Did that improve it? Is that an improvement?
Yes.
That is better. Thank you.
All right. So one of the reasons that the regions that we use that are used in the adequate public facilities chart they don't really tie us to any sort of limitations in terms of boundary adjustments or planning capacity solutions at the school levels. And I think that's a benefit to the school system because it's maximum flexibility. If we have schools in adjacent AFO regions that can relieve crowding, we're able to use seats wherever they are located in the county without limitation in terms of being in a different region. I understand Mr. Youngman's concern, and it's been voiced before, and I'm sympathetic to that. You're bringing that back up again. I think that's something we will discuss with DPZ in terms of aligning those regions. I know that there are challenges regarding school boundaries when you start layering the geographies on top of each other, school boundaries, AFO regions, DPZ planning areas, and then bringing in these new general plan focus areas. Some of those, like school boundaries, are not, we can't just change them to suit other geographies. So certain building blocks in terms of those layers would have to be locked in and may restrict the ability to line those things up geographically. But I think from our side, it is a benefit to the school system to not have limitations in terms of using seats in adjacent AFO districts to provide relief when needed.
Well, but I think the goal is to reduce the amount of redistricting and the distances of redistricting and a lack of predictability of redistricting. And I'm not saying that it would work, but if we could try to align better, you might not need all that flexibility because we might actually be able to not put you in that position. And as far as being tied to APFO regions, I mean, this is the time to look at these regions and APFO and how all these mechanisms work. And if a new mechanism's created that is going to reduce redistricting and reduce busing and reduce all that uncertainty and the, just the pain, community pain over those things. But what we're always hearing is it starts with the county, it starts with housing policy, it starts with DPZ, it's all development's fault. But so let's figure out a way to plan it better. So I appreciate that you're going to talk to DPZ and see if there is a path, because we're going to get, it's September, we're going to get this general plan in a month or whatever, and it's going to pass soon, but they've been working on it for 2 years, and this would seem to be a pretty valuable fundamental thing for us to have fully vetted before we give up on it. So,
understood.
Thank you, Chair Walsh.
Okay, Chair Walsh. So first, I want to really appreciate this opportunity and the council and the meeting with school board. I just wonder, is this just an opportunity to meet, discuss, or actually you will take the input from the school board and then you come back and kind of talk about the policy? Because I have very specific question about some clause, some language in the APFO.
Dr. Wu, the statutory requirement is that we have this discussion about proposed solutions. So if you have a solution to propose, let's hear it.
Okay, so I just went through the document, right? I think the first one, I have 4 points I want to make. The first one is on the first page, talk about the background. I would say they're missing one important point. So for example, they talk about the county to provide the B1 in that paragraph, the growth management process. You talk about a lot of stuff. And then I think in the third paragraph, they're missing one point that I'm reading what they have said. Underlying this subtitle is a need to provide a growth management process that will enable the county to provide adequate public roads, schools, and other facilities in a timely manner and achieve general plan growth objective. I think here they should have added one sentence, meet the residents' needs. I just don't see that. That should be priority or overarching goal for this APFO, because the residents' needs, it includes school and roads and many other stuff. That should be there. I didn't see that. That's my first feedback for that. And then on page 3, I think you talk about the impact fee. And page 3, I'm talking about the document in the package. So the first page is the agenda. So I just want you get that. So page 3 or page 4 in that package, you talk about impact fee. I think we have been a lot of discussion on this, and the reason we always had a problem in terms of funding, because the impact fee is not catching up to the needs. So we have needs both from the growth, and we have the needs for maintenance. So we're not able to catch that. That's the problem. Many resident parents, teachers, and community members complain about. We have a aging facility which is not keeping pace with the maintenance. And then we have a growing need for seats. We don't have seats. For example, we talk about middle school. And in middle school, the overall capacity is more than 100%, right? That's the problem we're facing. I think we should continuously examine the fee structure and the fee level to make sure we're able to catch up with that. And I don't see that discussion somewhere there. And then on page 4 about E. So the traffic study. I think I talked about this a few times. I shared that concern with the DPZ or the county council, even the county government. So we shouldn't allow the developers provide the traffic studies themselves. I think it's actually kind of chicken and try to catch some, and the fox try to catch some chickens that we provide something to allow us to do something. Then because the traffic study always said, okay, that development will be always fine and the traffic can be mitigated, that we're seeing again and again. I think the county should have collect the fee from the developer and do the study yourself, right? Have an independent agency to do the study. I heard from some people working the traffic study kind of area, right? They said because the developer paid them, so in general they can just go away with the developer, and eventually everything can be mitigated. But everybody can see what we're having now. The traffic is getting worse and worse. I hope you have some clause or some way to start this process, revise the process. In that way, we can see whether that study is independent, impartial, or correct. So the fourth point is on page 7. Or page 46 on that is for support, because there's so many parts. I think in the amendment part, like page 46 of the 99-page document. So we talk about this resale and new development chart. I think last time every board member and every council member had good understanding based on this discussion. The formula is flawed. I have a strong objection to use that formula or that table for this discussion, because that accumulated impact of a new development are not considered in this chart. So I think at least we can use the average yield rate for new development or for existing housing. That will probably at least provide a more balanced number to help us to mitigate the growth. I don't see that is here. So I'm objecting to use that table for this discussion. I hope the council and can think about it more carefully. And that's my four-point feedback. I'm not sure what the next step, but I want to raise that 4 point very directly, and I hope you'll consider that. If any council members have any questions, I think myself and board members and our school staff can answer that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. That your fourth point, the chart that you object to, which I'm on page 46 of our handout.
Yes, the resale, and then you see the.
Yeah, if you could just give me the title so I can circle back.
For example, for any projected increase in enrollment and indication, what portion of increase are attributed to sale or rental turnover existing residential. So the title of the title is actually kind of little May 2021 school chart, elementary school. So that impact by change the boundaries. Why? So they have like apartment turnover, resale, new construction, other factors. So they have numbers for every school, and
Okay, I got it. I know I'm looking at the right one. So that is the one.
sometimes the page 7. So on that, or
Okay.
in the
All
whole
right.
package, the page 46 and page 47. So both elementary school, middle school, and high school.
Okay. I do have 3 other Board of Education members whose hands I think are up, and they are Christina Delmont Small, Dr. Yun Liu, and Vicky Catronio. Ms. Delmont Small, if you still have a question, can you go ahead and ask it or
Yes,
a comment? Make it.
Good morning. So first, I would like to go very quickly to the past. About 15 years ago, there was a theory that in Howard County, apartments and townhouses would not bring people who have children. We have learned that that is incorrect. Because of the school system and the reputation of the school system, whatever housing we do or do not provide, the market will adjust. And what that means is we're going to have people who are going to continue to move into Howard County. It may not necessarily be the house that they would want or the housing that they would want, but we see time and time again, parents are making sacrifices in order to get into the school system. So the challenge that we have is that you asked a question before about APFO, and I'm going to say, speaking as myself, and hopefully my colleagues agree, that when developments continue to ask that they don't have to comply with APFO, this is adding to our problems. APFO is not as strong, in my opinion, as I would like it to be. But every time we say, oh, no, we have a pilot, we're not going to be part of APFO, we're making this problem worse and worse and worse because we're getting hit on both sides. We have capital challenges, and we also have capacity challenges. And as staff has been saying, when we build these schools, it's at a point in time when the decision is made based on an enrollment projection. By the time we open the doors, that enrollment far exceeds what the projection is. The problem we have is that we are trying to catch up. And I don't know how we're going to be able to do that, especially with the fact that we keep bringing people in and we also continue to not have funding in order to build the capacity. I like that Mr. Youngman is trying to think outside the box, and we've talked for years. I know you and I have had this discussion of what if we matched everything up better, and one area was the same, whether we looked at it from a development perspective or a school system perspective. I think that we should continue to have that discussion, but I think we have to bear in mind that even when we look towards that solution or any solution, we still are bound, unfortunately, by the fact that we are continuing to play catch up. So I think unless we change, those are our 2 variables, which is the funding and the amount of students who keep coming. We have to decide whether or not we're going to do that. From the school system, we have to come to you as our funding authorities and as those who make these decisions as far as following APFO and not following APFO, and sitting as the zoning board and making housing decisions and all of that, and ask you to help us, to help the students and our constituents, that we do something to stem the tide or increase the funding so that we can at some point hopefully catch up.
Thank you, Ms. Delmont-Small. Dr. Liu?
Morning. Well, thank you for this opportunity to discuss this with us. I really appreciate that. I have several comments. The first one is about the school boundary reassignment, because I consider that we're reacting to overcrowding issues. So I hope that we can actively plan so we can avoid overcrowding by spreading out the development. So my question is, when we do the school boundary reassignment, we decrease school utilization for certain schools, and that may open up new development based on APFO. So can we make a restriction about school or areas that have recently been have decreased utilization because of school reassignment, and then put restrictions to make sure that we don't immediately open up development, because otherwise we are moving students out from the school, and at the same time we're adding more development. It won't be fair for the student who got redistricted out. So I hope that we can add that for the Apfo. And also I hope that Apfo will consider deferred maintenance, because right now we're using utilization, but we know for some schools they are not overcrowded. However, they have deferred maintenance issue. So if we can add deferred maintenance into Apfo, consider that, it will be very helpful, because our schools need maintenance, and we want to make sure we take care of existing schools. And my third question is, how can we school board members actually participate in the planning? Before I joined the school board, I know nothing about zoning or planning, and thank you for inviting me into the Hoco by Design school planning capacity advice group, and I learned a lot. So I want to participate more, and my question is, how can we participate more? Because we want to contribute, we want to work together with county council. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. Ms. Catroni, you're up next, and I think maybe you might have an answer to Dr. Liu's last question, right?
If only I had the answers. I just wanted to quickly, and I'm sorry if I missed it because I'm watching this other meeting. What Dr. Wu was talking about, that page in the report where they talk about the number of students from apartments, from turnover, from whatever. I think that data has been misused to represent the impact of new construction on student enrollment, and I'm hoping that we can add to that report so that we can see developments over 20 units. What is the actual enrollment for that particular school year as part of the report, so we can see the impact, the cumulative impact of new construction. So that was my only comment on that. I think it kind of gives a false representation of the enrollment just to say it's for 1 year. It's a school system data point, 1 year, but we all know that students don't disappear after 1 year and need a seat in the school buildings. So that was my only comment on that. And what you wanted me to provide a solution to what Dr. Liu said, how we can participate. I think what we're doing now, and I think legislatively, we, the exemptions for certain projects have a devastating impact. Especially, why are students who live in poverty or in low socioeconomic status, it's okay for them to be in overcrowded schools, and they need more services, more pullouts. And our tiny overcrowded schools like Bryant Woods, they don't have the space to provide what these students need. So yeah, I think that she raises a good point, and that we need to stay vigilant on the legislative side of this, because I think unfortunately it pits groups against each other, and that's not what this is about. With the affordable housing versus the school system, we want to have adequate capacity for all students, including students who come from lower socioeconomic status. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Catrino. I thought you had also mentioned the review that happens by some element of the school system for developments where they have the option of weighing in and making the request that a school site be part of development approval. Not on the big picture general plan, but on the very micro level, as a plan for a particular project is going through the development review process, there is the opportunity for the school side to see that plan, to make a request that says, wow, this is going to have a real big impact on enrollment in those schools. And so as a result, on the surrounding schools, if redistricting would eventually or immediately be necessitated. And so that was another piece where we're hoping maybe the school system can be more assertive in terms of saying this particular project is problematic and there needs to be some protections for that. We have 2 more hands raised on the council side now, and that is Ms. Rigby and then Ms. Young.
I think I needed to lower my electronic hand. My apologies.
Oh dear. Okay, well, I finally found them, and now that doesn't work. Miss Young, then. whose hand is not technically raised, but Ms. Harrod pointed that out. And I see Dr. Wu, did you just raise your hand as well?
Yes. So
Okay.
Chair Walsh, I think my question is, I really appreciate you invited the board to speak with you on this issue. So I hope it's just not a myth because the requirement from that code, right? I hope this conversation will lead to some change in the APFO and which will be reflected in the will of both council and school board. How do you think, like, for example, I talk about the traffic study, right? Something like that, very specific, or the impact fee readjustment, or the resale and these kind of tables, and exactly how do you feel? We can really share that feedback with you and be discussed publicly. Instead, we just have conversations and everything will gone.
No, I agree with you, Dr. Wu, that more needs to happen in response to these conversations. Ms. Young, what are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought was that Dr. Wu is absolutely right. Thank you very much for bringing that up, and I'm happy to work with you on specific language to revise that bill and to make it more responsive to what's really going on in our county. So I really appreciate you doing all that work ahead of time, and feel free to give me a call and we can sit down and work on it. And it sounds like Ms. Walsh is also very interested in working on it. So I think you've got at least 2 council members who would be happy to follow up very specifically with you on that verbiage. So thank you for doing all that pre-work for us. we appreciate it. Then I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Liu for her participation in Hoco by Design on the school committee. I don't think we probably have done enough to bring in the school board. I know Ms. Catrunio also participated. We were hoping that even more people, and I guess Mr. Siddiqui participated, but we were hoping that even more people from the school district would be participating on Hoco by Design, and that much of the focus would be on this very big issue, because this is probably the biggest issue that our county faces, keeping up with our school construction and renovation at the same time that we're adding tens of thousands of people, which is what our Hoco by Design plan will call for. And one of the areas, as I'm sure that you all are aware, that they would like to develop in a more intensive way is the Gateway area. And there are no schools out there that could handle any extra students at this point, which would mean building right from the bottom up. And you listen to what Mr. Lubley had to say today about how much money we have for renovations and school construction, and it's very clear that this county cannot afford to put in thousands of new people in an area where there's no schools or no school capacity without a better plan than what we have right now. And then finally, I have a question for, this is Dr. Martirano, and it's sort of following through on what Ms. Petronio said, and I believe Dr. Wu may have alluded to, and Ms. Delmont Small, and that is we have an Apfo exemption, and Chair Walsh also. We have an Apfo exemption coming up in front of us right now that would bring 47 more students over capacity, and I'm not sure what the actual number is that would be going to Bryant Woods, but it is significant, and it would bring Bryant Woods in 2024 to 136.6% capacity, the largest overcapacity school in all of Howard County in 2024. And I have 2 questions. I guess one is for Mr. Lubley and one is for Dr. Martirano. The first question is, does that 136.6% include the students that would be coming from the redeveloped enterprise apartments. And number two, for Dr. Martirano, when you're adding students who are from high poverty households to a school that already has many students from high poverty households, do we have the ability in the school district to add more resources to that school so that those students are able to stay, well, they're able to access social services, their families are able to access social services, the students are able to keep up educationally, et cetera. So those are my two questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Lubley. I'll take the next one.
Thank you for the question. I believe it does include those students, but I will confirm with Mr. Rogers and Department of Planning and Zoning to confirm that it does include those, ma'am.
And I'll address the latter. I'm just going to put it out there for the record. I would highly discourage us from making any exemptions to any of these decisions that are going to place further impact on our schools that have the greatest need. They may appear to be benign at first, but when we're looking at those exemptions in a total amount, it creates a concern for us. One, capacity in terms of enrollment at a school that's already highly enrolled. Two, there is the additional need for services that you've already articulated, Councilmember Young, in the sense of more supports. And we would adjust based upon the per pupil allocations of which we would do for class size and the need for staffing. But there are also intangibles that create already challenges for a school that already has additional needs. So we've tried to approach all this in a very artful way, but we do not want anything that was, as we're trying to solve one problem, to create more challenges for us by adding more students through an exemption process.
Thank you both, and I look forward to getting those numbers, Mr. Lubley, and I appreciate your perspective, Dr. Martirano.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martirano and Ms. Young. I don't see any more hands raised from our Board of Education members or our council members. And I'm pausing for someone to correct me if that is wrong. It's been about an hour that we've discussed this. Dr. Wu, I am grateful for your concluding sentence, which is, this is a statutorily required conversation, but unless we want to continue having this exact same conversation every single year with an increasing student body, an increasing deficit in terms of seats available inside a school building to teach them in, we have to do some follow-up, and we have to do something different than what's been done, at least for the last 3 years that we've been in office, and for however long this problem has been heading in a completely foreseeable direction. But I think with that, we will conclude our discussion on agenda item number 1. I thank you, school board members, for joining us this morning and sharing with us your comments, which we've taken diligent notes of, and we'll follow up with you. And for Howard County Public School Systems, Dr. Martirano and your staff, thank you for the information that you provide us.